Just like that, the second hour is here. OutKick 360 rolls on from Nashville and across the OutKick network. Glad you're with us. The NFL Combine is underway in Indianapolis. Tons of news and notes to hit. John McClain will join us in 20 minutes as well. Plenty of coaches talking. And, hey, Derek Carr's even there making visits with teams. Going through the car wash.
Seems a little desperate of Derek Carr to me. Very odd. That's not the
He's also able to get face-to-face with some other teams instead of flying in and wasting 2 weeks.
Look, I like Derek Carr. Great guy, great teammate, good quarterback. Not a great quarterback, good quarterback. Mm-hmm. That's the sign that he's a good, not great quarterback. Just another one of those signs, because the other top guys in the league aren't going to go on a car wash at the Combine with teams just to show up and glad hand, right?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of the difference.
Can you imagine if Carson Wentz did this now as a free agent?
People are just shutting the door in his face. He's trying to go team to team, and they're just, I'm sorry, Carson, we got to deal with some other business. And they slam the door in his face.
Yes. So let's start with the Packers. Plenty of news there, and or maybe not, based on GM Brian Gutekunst, who says, hey, we'd like for Aaron to let us know what he wants to do. And he spoke today to media about the process now that Aaron has emerged from the darkness retreat.
Not yet. No, I mean, we've, changed some texts and things like that, but we haven't had a chance to speak yet. Yeah, we're going through our process as normal. So obviously free agency is coming up here. That's an important, part of what we're doing. So it'd be nice to have some answers before then. But until we have any conversations, we're still in a good spot. Yeah, I think, obviously our feelings haven't changed about Aaron, but we need to have some of those conversations about our team, where it's going, where he's at, before we go forward.
And that ending right there, where he's at, I think that goes back to the report where they want him all in. And Chad, I don't think you're going to get him all in for beyond a year, even when they have signed him to extensions and giving him what he's wanting to be the highest paid quarterback for last year. He gets the $50 million or whatever. He's in for one more year every time he comes back to Green Bay.
When Gutekunst says we're just going through our normal process, well, this has now become the normal process of not really knowing what Aaron Rodgers wants. And you could tell a little bit, I could at least, like sort of the frustration, but also just the genuine acknowledgement that this is where we are right now. It's every offseason. So this is our process. We go about personnel decisions. We look at draft picks, and we decide what we're going to do based on the understanding or lack thereof of whether or not our star quarterback is going to want to play or come back or be invested or whatever the case may be. Now, also, when you say we're going through the process, I don't know what that process entails without knowing whether or not your first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback is in the fray or not. So that seems like a pretty big building block of decisions you're going to make in the offseason, is whether or not that's the case, if he's in or not. But I do buy that when Gutekunst says, Hutton, hey, this is our process. We're left in the dark by Aaron Rodgers. We got to go about our business. We can't help it. He's not talking to us. We've barely spoken. He was in a darkness retreat. He hasn't told us anything.
Right.
But we hope that he says something before free agency starts.
Chad, something that you mentioned during the playoffs and even just prior to the playoffs, the Bills' defense and the fact that someone has to take the blame for why the Bills bowed out the way they did. Well, Leslie Frazier is falling on the sword. At least that's how I perceive this, because he told the Bills he's taking a year off from coaching. He's taking a step back, is the way he informed Brandon Beane, their general manager. And Brandon Beane said today that Frazier's taking a step back, and that the quote was, there's a lot of scrutiny on it, there's a lot of hours, a lot of time put in. Again, not speaking for Leslie, but sometimes you may just want to take a breath for a minute. Again, that would be for him to say. But he was very adamant that he's not going to retire. My 2 cents, just wanted to take a step back this season. That's Leslie Frazier, the now former former defensive coordinator, per the GM in Buffalo.
It does sound like he was basically given the option to step away or be fired, that they were going to go in a different direction. And he said, I'll just leave if you don't want me, and I'll take a year off and then get a job somewhere else. Because it's very weird wording
And there's no, and
he's just going to step away.
He admitted that there's no assurances from him that he's returning a year later to the Bills.
Yeah,
they're gonna move on.
See, I would just want to just say it what it was. I mean, if that's the case, like that, that's fine. If Leslie Frazier wants to say, "Well, I'm leaving under my own accord," or phrase it however you want, but if Sean McDermott came to me and said, "Hey, it was atrocious what happened at the end of the year, and the way we lost that game to Cincinnati with, this was the year to win the Super Bowl. We got to go in a different direction." Sort of what you said, Hutton, you're kind of falling on, someone's going to fall on the sword for this, and it ended up being Leslie Frazier. I'd rather it just be what it was, and you just say, yeah, they fired me, or they wanted to go in a different direction. I honor that if that's what they want, and I'm now going to take a year off and get a job somewhere else because I'm not done coaching.
Yeah, and maybe they just didn't want him calling plays because
that's also the scenario of he kept his job, but they were taking away his responsibility.
We're not going to fire you, but Sean McDermott's now going to call the defense.
And his response was, "I'll just leave."
Could be. Yeah, could be.
It's not your typical wording of a statement when someone leaves your organization.
Or the time of year. Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So something's up. I don't think it's anything awful. I just think he was told to do something or that they wanted to go in a different direction. He was given the option that he could step away or that he'd be fired. Or, like you said, I think it's a likely scenario where we're taking some of your play calling responsibility away. We're going to promote someone to be co-defensive coordinator, something along those lines, to where he said, "No, I'm good. I've done this long enough. I'll step away for a year. You guys get after it. I'll find another job." And
we don't know the timing of this. Brandon Beane said that he's had conversations, multiple plural conversations with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott about how to handle filling that role, which could be McDermott calling plays. They also have two former defensive coordinators on their staff already, with Eric Washington, who's their defensive line coach, and with Al Holcomb, who is the defensive assistant as a senior member of their staff. Both have called plays in the past. Of course, McDermott is known for that. And now, with Leslie Frazier stepping aside, the longest tenured NFL defensive coordinators, Lou Anarumo and Steve Spagnuolo. Those two were both hired in 2019.
Wow.
Those are the longest tenured defensive coordinators in the league currently. That's crazy.
It's amazing what these great quarterbacks and offenses have done to that profession. It's cost a lot of people their jobs quickly, right? There's a ton of turnover with that. We've seen, defensive guys also get promotions to head coaches, which has been a part of this too. But that is nuts to think about. You've got, 3 years, really, of guys that's the longest tenure in the league. Crazy.
We will hit some other NFL headlines in about 10 minutes with John McClain. Chad, Nate Oates has talked again, and he has commented on the warm-up and player announcement prior to tip-off against Arkansas on Saturday, where they had the pat down. Here's Nate Oates' response from today.
That situation's on me. We addressed as a team. As soon as I brought it up to them, they immediately understood how it could be interpreted, and we all felt awful about it. They explained to me that it's like when TSA checks you before you get on a plane, and now Brandon's cleared for takeoff. We, as the adults in the room, should have been more sensitive to how it could have been interpreted. And I dropped the ball. That's it. I dropped the ball on it. We've addressed it. I can assure you it won't happen again.
Every time the adults in the room comment, they're making excuses for Brandon Miller for the last week. That's what I take away from that.
I have a hard time believing that the team is that blind to all this. It's like it didn't happen. It's like it's just gone away.
That's how they've treated it.
If you're someone that was asleep in your dorm the night the young mother was murdered, then maybe it doesn't feel real to you. You just read the news stories and know what your coach has said about it and all that. Brandon Miller was there. I mean, Brandon Miller was a part of it. He drove the car that had the weapon in it that shot the young mother. I mean, he fled the scene when the murder happened. It's just odd to me that you don't think for a second, maybe a TSA pat down for weapons and other items maybe that's not the best pregame ritual to go through when this has been going on for a month and a half now since the crime happened. I mean, I just don't buy that they're that stupid.
Well, they're
Maybe
not.
they are.
They're not. But Brandon Miller put this on his Twitter account as the header, at the heading, as the image up
I mean,
top.
are they going to say that's just coincidence also?
Yeah, they'll find an excuse for him.
Here's the other thing about what's going on right now, which infuriates me even more, is that you've got Alabama's SID telling all the media after games, hey, we're just going to talk about the game, guys. Only questions about the game. Trying to be a little dictator on what the coverage is going to be like, right? That bothers me. The other thing is now we've entered a cycle where Nate Oates is only discussing or opening a press conference with something that he can't explain. You can explain that, right? You can explain that, hey, I didn't really know about this. It's a TSA pat down. Bama fans all weekend were telling me it's an MMA thing that they do. It's not. He's saying it's TSA, you're cleared for flight now, right? It's basically what he's saying,
yeah.
cleared for takeoff when he does that. Well, you can buy that or not, whatever. I'm sure when it started out, it may have been that thing, but you stop doing it, when all this goes down. I think most reasonable people would say just stop with that pregame ritual when all this horrific stuff happens, right? But Nate Oates can go into a press conference and say, hey, guys, kind of the false, it's my fault, it's all my fault, but here's what it was. It was a TSA thing that's been going on all year. Talk to him. It's not going to happen again. Now let's talk about our next game that's coming up. Because he can explain that. You know what Nate Oates can't explain? The decision not to discipline Brandon Miller at all.
Yes.
And he's not talking about it anymore. He's rolling over on his AD and saying Greg Byrne has talked about it in interviews. He's released a statement. I defer to his statement and what our AD has said.
My statement defers to his statement.
Yeah. I mean, there could be, look, the way this thing is trending right now, something dumb will happen in the next Alabama game.
Yes, which
someone's
going to
make
Auburn.
a gesture. Someone's going to say something in the crowd. Something's going to happen. And then Nate Oates is going to get up to his podium again, and he's going to open the press conference saying, guys, I want to start with the last incident that just happened, and I just want to say that's my fault. It's been handled. It won't happen again. And this
year. It won't happen again this year.
This is what happened. It's something guys do normally, but this is what we're going to kind of do with it. And, all right, now questions about our season finale of the regular season coming up this week. But they won't discuss the real issue because there's nothing they can say. He knows it. Greg Byrne knows it. Alabama, the university knows it. Alabama fans deep down inside of their crimson heart, they know it. They know that there's nothing you can say other than the dude is an awesome basketball player and they are trying to protect his eligibility in playing, and that's why he's playing, because this miraculous season that could end with this team cutting down the nets in Houston at the Final Four rides on this one guy playing. If he doesn't play, we might get beat in the first or second round. If he's playing, we're winning a national title, or we're getting this program to a Final Four. That's the real explanation.
And if this were
you sold your soul, you sold your soul to all this. There's nothing else to say, so they're trying to get people not to ask the questions, and they can't say anything other than, let's talk about the TSA pat down. I can't explain that. That I can explain. These other decisions, can't explain it, but I can explain this TSA ritual.
Yeah, and it took him a day to figure that out, Because in the other presser, he was saying, I don't even watch it. I don't know what it was. Apparently it happens all season. I don't know.
Yeah, it was all the Alabama fans in my timeline saying it was an MMA thing they've done all year. And then apparently he got the full story, and it's a TSA thing at the airport they've done all year.
And if this were a team, any team, that had no chance of even competing for a tournament bid, this would not be an issue either. Brandon Miller would be suspended.
And look,
we would have seen the punishment.
Yes, and his explanation is believable. Because he puts his arms out and he kind of takes off after he does it. So that whole thing, I'm sure it's been going on all year. If people have seen it and they've done it, and the team tells them that. But again, common sense. You just don't continue doing that.
Right.
After all this happens.
And then post it.
There needs to be
after the
some
game.
change of behavior.
Then post it after the game. That's
Right.
the double down on that, which has been, the ice in the veins and all that. I'm sure he does that all the time. But when trash is coming at him from South Carolina fans, and he's pointing to the ones that were there, pointing to ice in his veins when he hits the shot to take it to overtime and then wins the game in overtime, and then follows it up with this, this in the same week that we've seen Alabama speak on it and then say they knew about details about the text and then say they didn't until the testimony. Crazy saga.
Well, look, you're
right, it continues tomorrow.
If you're one of these Alabama fans who's tweeting OutKick or Hutton or me or Clay or anyone saying, just shut up about it already. It's been a week. I got that from one person. It's been a whole week since the People Magazine or USA Today interview came out with the victim's parents or the victim's dad about how upset he is to watch Brandon Miller play these games. Would you shut up about it? It's been one whole week since this happened. I'm thinking, give me a break. You want the story to end? Lose. That's the easy way for this story to go out of the national consciousness, at least for now. They're not going to lose anytime soon because they're a great team. They're going to keep winning, and everyone is going to keep talking about this as they get closer and closer to a Final Four or a national title. Now, here's my prediction. When they lose Hutton, and when Brandon Miller immediately declares for the NBA draft and he's gone, maybe we get a little more clarification from Alabama on some things. Maybe they come out and they're more transparent now that he's no longer with the program, and they say they're not going to roll over on him, but say, hey, this was unprecedented. There are plenty of things we should have done differently here. They're not going to do that now because they're dug in the sand. I don't expect that, but maybe that happens when he's no longer in the program.
I don't think that happens unless the head coach wants it to happen. No different than football. Because Clearly Nate wants him to play. I think that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think that he's calling most of the shots here. I do think that, Nate Oates doesn't strike me as a guy who is willfully apologizing for anything. So I do think that at least the AD or someone is getting in his ear and saying, you got to address the pat down. You got to address this after that game. Because he was very quick to come out and say,
if you didn't know
it's unacceptable, it's inappropriate, it's not going to happen again.
And if you didn't know what was happening or what was inappropriate based on what has transpired since January 15th, now, if you come back with another thing that happens and you say, I've never seen that before, but apparently it's been going on all year, you can't use that again. It's time to just get a clue and figure out what it's going to look like and come across as before it happens, which this has been the whole week of statements and non-statements.
And again, the story's not changing and not going away.
And no one's denying the story.
And my narrative on it, the narrative of really pretty much almost everyone that I've watched or heard from that's not either an Alabama media member, fan, or Jay Billis, they all have kind of the same take. Something should have been done. Whether it been a suspension or, temporary suspension when you found this out, something other than nothing happening to Brandon Miller in this.
We head to Indianapolis when we return. John McClain will join us for his weekly chat. We'll dive into details of what's happened in Indy with tons of news and info from NFL organizations. We'll also get details on the Daniel Snyder back and forth with the league and the potential sale of the Commanders. And one of the guys who's bidding on the team is in John's backyard in Houston. That's next on OutKick 360.
As a pitcher, there's nothing I love more. There was nothing that I relished more than a one pitch out. That was like a gift from God as a pitcher, because I had this game plan. I got to get a hitter out. I got to work this count. I got to do these things. You give me a one pitch out, and then I didn't like to face guys like you for this reason. I don't want to have to use 7, 8, 9 pitches to get an out. I don't want, and that was the Tony Gwynn thing. You had the strike zone, but you knew the strike zone. And so, my forte, you show me a guy that strikes out 100 times, I can show you a guy I can get out pretty easily because he's got holes. You show me a guy that gets on base 40% of the time, and I'm going to have a little bit of a concern. And you mentioned something that I think tails into the discussion we're going to have today. I worked quick, and so people have asked me about the pitch clock, and I said the pitch clock will never affect a pitcher that sucks, because good pitchers work fast. And if you saw Scherzer yesterday, it was hilarious. He struck a guy out who was backing out of the batter's box. I mean, but that's what we did. Tempo was part of my game. That was part of it's a weapon, and hitter, and not being able to. And I'm wondering, because you were a guy that took time in at bats. You could make a 10-pitch at bat go a while. How are hitters going to have to adjust now You can only get out of the box one time. You got to be in the, the tempo is going to be a lot quicker, good or bad for hitters.
Bad. I mean, look, I mean, you're talking to a guy. Okay, remember. So when I let off the game on the road, okay, at that moment in time, I controlled everything.
Right.
So when we used to play Atlanta, okay, in Atlanta, I used to take a long sweeping walk, bro, and stop right in front of Ted Turner and Jane Fonda, and stare right into Jane Fonda's eyes, and I'd say some things that I shouldn't say on here, but that was tradition, and people would be yelling, "Get in the box, get in the box," and I'd be like, you know what I'd say.
Yep.
And you don't get voted the most hated player in the league 5 years in a row without doing these kind of things.
Right.
But I was voted the most hated player in the league because I made the other people's jobs hard.
Yep.
See, like I say, remember our team? Like I see you talking to the other teammate, we're fighting.
Yeah.
Like, well, we're playing for real money here.
Right.
Like, and the thing about it is, and that's why when you pitched, you were so prepared, took it so serious. You carry it out to the field too. Don't forget, when you're out there in the field and you got a guy, I don't want to use people's names.
Guy going 3-2 on everybody, and no, I get that, and that was part of that too, Lenny. I learned on that team because it was a veteran team, and I was a younger guy. Listen, when we're playing in St. Louis and it's 165 degrees on the turf, I need to get my players off the field. And so that became because I always wanted, and as I got older and became more in charge of my defense, I always wanted guys invested in the day I pitched.
We head to Indianapolis, site of the NFL Combine. OutKick 360 rolls on with John McClain of GallerySports.com. Always busy when really the first 2 days of the Combine, John, from a news perspective this time of year, because the coaches and GMs who are there, they're talking to the media, and there are headlines galore, both in Indy and across the league with Dan Snyder. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. It's great. You can't come to the Combine and have a bad time if you like the NFL, you like the draft. And you have today, the first day, you have coaches and general managers. Tomorrow you have the rest of the coaches and GMs. And then they start with the players. They start with edge rushers like Will Anderson Jr. and interior linemen like Jalen Carter, who are the two highest rated prospects in the draft. Anderson, I believe, is going to work out. I think Carter's not, waiting for Georgia's pro day. Bryce Young is the only top quarterback not going to throw. He's waiting for Alabama's pro day. And all anybody cares about Bryce Young, they don't need him to throw. They've seen him throw for 2 years. They want to know what he weighs, and they want to know how tall he is.
John, I got to ask, what's it like, now that you're covering all sports for Gallery Sports, going from spring training and that weather to going to Indianapolis, which while we love the combine and every year we go, I don't think I've ever seen the sun peek through a cloud in Indy during this week in February in Indianapolis.
Dad, like you ought to be here because the sun's shining bright.
Oh,
When I walked down the street this morning, it was like 38 or 40, and I had my jacket on. And when I came out this afternoon to come back to my room, I was sweating like crazy because the weather's so nice. People are riding bikes in shorts and T-shirts. These locals are going crazy. And I've been coming here since the first one in 87. And I can say at this time of year, I've never seen a day like this. And I think there's only one day that we could get even what I consider cold weather. And I love to visit snow. And I usually don't have that chance. And I wait till I get to Indy because I've been here when it's 10 degrees and snowing like crazy. But we're not getting any snow this week. And I feel happy for the locals because they are excited to be able to get outdoors.
John McClain with us. John, you mentioned Bryce Young, and all people care about is the NFL people I'm talking about care about the official height. What's too small for Bryce Young? What are we talking here? What keeps him from being the top quarterback selected?
Jonathan, and he may be the top quarterback selected. The Bears may trade the top pick to the Texans or the Colts. And then again, C.J. Stroud or Will Levis after all the scouting process is over. And Will Levis impresses everybody in his shorts and T-shirts and with his personality. I can't imagine he would be the first overall pick. But Bryce Young, and this is weird to say, Kyler Murray, there was a big question. And he got to eat for a month, and he got up to 207, and he was almost 5'10", more like 5'9 and a half. But because he had such great speed and quickness, people didn't worry about him as much because he's muscular, has a big butt. But as you guys know, Bryce Young is almost frail looking. And I see a lot of pictures on the internet, one last week, and it wasn't fair. Somebody took a picture with him standing between two women who were obviously wearing heels, and he looked like their child. And he's just thin. So they say he's been working with a nutritionist. Zay Flowers, the receiver from Boston College, gained 13 pounds of muscle since the end of the season. Now, we don't know if Bryce Young's weight was accurate at Alabama. They said 6 foot, 194. He could have been 184. But if he's 194, it'd be easier to get up in the 2.5 to 210 range. But if he's 5'10", and people are going to be happy. If he's 5'11", they'll be ecstatic. Nobody expects him to be 6 foot. Remember when Kyler Murray grew his hair out and he was hoping that would help him add an inch or two, and they kept pushing the thing down, and that doesn't work. It's weird. In the NBA, in the NFL, players shrink at the combine. In the NBA, they grow. And I checked on that. I said, why is it that a guy at Baylor is listed 6'6" and then 6'8" when he gets to the NBA? They measure them in tennis shoes. And I started thinking about that. That's pretty smart because they don't play barefooted. So why didn't the NFL measure them in cleats? And, there's a lot of agents and players who would be happy. And, Bryce Young would love to be able to step up and get measured in cleats. Isn't it amazing that 1 inch and a few 5 pounds could make a difference? The guy can play. He had one injury, and that was an arm injury when it was awkward, had nothing to do with him taking a blow. And people are not worried about him throwing. He knows how to throw. And if he were 6'2" or 3, he'd be looked at like Trevor Lawrence and Andrew Luck as a generational talent.
Joe Shane, the GM of the New York Giants, said he remains cautiously optimistic that they are going to get Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones back in the mix. Of the two, who do you think the priority is?
if Daniel Jones is asking for $45 million, and I can't, it doesn't hurt to ask. You can ask for a lot of things in life. It doesn't mean you're going to get them. He's not worth 45. Now, if he settled for say 30 to 35 after he had one good year, that would be good. It'd be better to franchise a running back because running backs are cheaper. They don't have the longevity. So if they're going to lose one, I would say they're going to lose Barkley because you can get running backs. And but they've got to keep Daniel Jones. But man, if he insists, he's going to get franchised to make 37.
So when Brian Gutekunst is talking about Aaron Rodgers saying, this is just part of our process where they're awaiting word from him and not really texting, John, it really is kind of part of their process at this point of just sitting around and waiting to see what he wants to do next. But what kind of bind does that put the Packers in, or do you think they've already mentally moved on in their preparations of what they're going to do next?
Chad, at least they got the quarterback. If they did not have the quarterback and you got free agency coming up and then the draft, they'd be worried about it. But they knew who the quarterback's going to be. And I'm guessing when he's gone, it'll be a relief when he's out of there. Kind of like when Russell Wilson left Seattle. They're like, phew. And I think it'll be that way with them. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's worked with the Jets for 22 years. And I said, I see the media and the fans are trying to be such an influence, puts pressure on the Jets to get Aaron Rodgers, giving up 2 ones and paying him $58.3 million and a huge cap figure. And then if it doesn't work, you're hamstrung. But do you go for the gold? I was talking to a friend with the Buccaneers. I said, was it worth winning the Super Bowl and then being so bad? Absolutely. Friend with the Rams. Absolutely. Think of the teams, including the Titans and the Texans. For a Super Bowl, they'd be happy to be bad for 10 years. And I'm guessing that the Packers are ready to move on from him, but they've got to handle him with kid gloves. And the other thing is when they trade him, they're still going to sell every seat. Their most popular franchise in the NFL. Nobody's going to cancel season tickets because Aaron Rodgers is no longer the quarterback. They've had a great run with Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, but they've only won 2 Super Bowls out of all that time to have 2 of the greatest quarterbacks ever.
John, I think the Titans could be one of the wild card teams, biggest wild card maybe, of the quarterback movement this offseason. Because Rand Carthon and Vrabel are speaking today, so this is circulating now through all the national outlets about the quarterback position. Again, Tannehill's been linked to the Jets, for instance, in reports. Rand Carthon, in a question that was specifically about, is Tannehill the quarterback for 2023? His response was, Ryan is under contract, and I just want to speak freely for a moment. I know everybody wants to make a big deal out of the quarterback position or whether he'll be here or not, but you guys have to accept the fact that Ryan is under contract for us right now. He is a Titan, and he will be a Titan. But that's also under the assumption, I think, John, that he restructures the deal in order to help the cap. And this is also a contract now for Tannehill where they can save $18 million against the cap by either trading or releasing him. I've also heard this organization say they weren't trading A.J. Brown, and then they did. So I think they're a wild card for a quarterback move.
Titans have a talent issue and they got a cap issue. And boy, if Tannehill was playing great or even really, really well, it'd be easier to stomach. But if they do trade him, and if you're the Jets, do you think he's the answer? No. I'd rather have Derek Carr than Ryan Tannehill. And then what are the Titans going to do if they do trade him, go after Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo? Are they really, is Garoppolo an improvement over Tannehill? When you got to have 4 new offensive linemen, I feel bad for the quarterback that's starting behind that offensive line.
And Tannehill wasn't the problem last year. I'll say that. He had his big issues the year prior. But they know they've got a short-term solution there. I think even with Tannehill back, they could be a factor in the draft.
Really? You think they may take a quarterback?
I know they don't have a backup right now in Malik Willis.
No, they don't. Everybody I've talked to says you don't see a team that could be putting 4 new starters in the offensive line. Chiefs, I think, did 3 after the last Super Bowl loss. to New England because they just totally changed up front. And man, you can take one in the first round, a tackle, and you can take one later, and then you can get one in free agency, like when they got Ben Jones from the Texans. But man, if they want a quarterback, and Rand Cawthorn comes from an organization where they spent a fortune to get Trey Lance, he got hurt. They didn't spend squat to get Brock Purdy, and he was surprised. And then Garoppolo. So they've invested in a trade with Garoppolo, a new contract, a big-time trade to get Trey Lance, and then Mr. Irrelevant. So their quarterbacks come from different spots, and I'm sure that that's a possibility there. But Tannehill, if you don't have a line and you don't have A.J. Brown, that A.J. Brown deal, I talked to you guys about this, the Texans, and I don't need to talk to the Jaguars and Colts to know this, but the Texans were like just shocked he was traded and excited that he was traded because he burned them so bad.
John, Dan Snyder's burning the NFL. What do you make of the latest reports that he wants to indemnify himself with the league so that the league then financially reimburses him for any legal action that comes his way? And where are we headed knowing that Jerry Jones is reportedly negotiating this with Dan Snyder?
There are so many conflicting reports from legitimate news organizations about Snyder, Jeff Bezos, and the possible sale of the Commanders. And I don't know who to believe. You know, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Snyder hates the Washington Post. There's talk that he won't consider Bezos as the owner. And then there's a report that he's leaking that because he wants Bezos to pay more money. Wants $7 billion. Nobody's doing it. There's a report, Tillman Fertitta from Houston, who owns the Rockets, that he's offered $5.5 billion. So the league wants him out. You know, he is a blackout in the NFL. Any owner that buys that team, I wish the three of us had the money. We would be so big. We'd be like Abraham Lincoln in D.C. They build statues to us because we took over for Dan Snyder. And anybody that comes in as a new owner, they're going to give them that stadium down next to RFK Stadium where Snyder wants to go. The stadium is a dump. He's let it become a dump, and they got a pretty good team. So he's pretty stupid if he doesn't do it. It would be ego. And Jerry Jones is close to Snyder. I don't know why. Maybe he can just get through to him. So they're letting Jerry try to negotiate it. The bottom line is Snyder's going to come out at least $5 billion ahead of where he was when he bought that franchise. Do you guys know who they approached to try to get to buy that franchise from Jack Kent Cook before Snyder got it? Bob McNair.
Really?
Bob McNair had let the NFL know. They had vetted him, seen his finances. They asked him, would you be interested in Jacksonville? No. Would you be interested in Miami? Maybe. And he looked into Miami, but he didn't want the state. He wanted the stadium and the team. And he told me the only place he would have considered besides Houston was Washington because he spent a lot of time up there because of politics. And I was thinking, man, if they'd have got Bob McNair instead of Dan Snyder, but it's time for him to go. What is it like to live like Snyder when everybody hates you?
I mean, I guess okay if you're going to sell your team for $5.5 billion or whatever the estimated cost is. You know, it's not the worst existence.
Sail around the world with your yacht and your IMAX.
Yeah,
and you don't give a what about people think about you.
I mean, it is funny even with the Bezos thing about the concept of winning and losing with these guys. That losing to Daniel Snyder is having Jeff Bezos pay him $5.7 billion for his team, but the fact that the guy he hates that covered him negatively gets to have his team as a loss for it's different stakes with these guys, no doubt about it. Different stakes for a guy like Tillman Fertitta also, John, who is a billionaire that's in talks with the Commanders about owning this team. What is his reputation like in Houston, and what do you think about the possibility of him owning an NFL team?
I just thought of something first. What if Snyder said to Bezos, he says, look, I'll sell you Washington, but I want to own the Washington Post. then
See,
he could
John,
just fire everybody.
You think like a billionaire, John. That's why we love you. That's how a billionaire would operate is, let's do a trade. I'll give you, a bunch of millions off or $1 billion off, but now I get to own your newspaper now as part
Wouldn't
of this.
that be something?
That would be amazing.
My goodness. You'd see a mass exodus from the Washington Post before he could fire him. Tillman Fertitta is very respected in Houston. His restaurant empire began there. He owns restaurants all over the country. He's got hotels in Vegas and Louisiana. He told a story one time about meeting with his family and said, I think I'm going to buy the Rockets. And they're like, okay. And he said, that'd be great. Thanks, Dad. We're looking forward to it. But it's going to cost me $2.1 billion. Whoa, now wait a minute. And now he's turned that franchise into being worth more. And I know he wants to own an NFL team. All I want from Tillman Fertitta is to bring the NHL to Houston. But it's his building. And problem is, if the NHL franchise was like the Predators and consistently good, and the Rockets right now are in their third year of being the worst team in the league, people would be going to see the NHL franchise. So he's interested in NFL instead. And I don't know if he'll end up getting it, but the fact that he's interested, you can imagine what a big deal that is in Houston.
John McClain covering the Combine this week for GallerySports.com, and you can check out the site for more columns there, more great coverage. Follow him on social at McClain_on_NFL. John, we're jealous. Have fun in Indy and have some cocktail sauce for us at Elmo's.
I'll be down there in a couple of days. By the way, they've changed it around. They now have all the interviews where the bench press was, and Radio Row's gotten bigger, and they need more space for that. And it's not nearly as long a walk to get to the entrance as it used to be. You guys are missed. I missed last year because I was planning to retire. Now I'm living the life. In a couple of weeks, I'll be coming to you from Vegas.
Yep.
Whereas my boss, Mattress Mac, who bet a fortune on the University of Houston, win a national championship, I said, you know what? What if I go to Vegas and stay at Caesars, which is his favorite place, and then I write about the University of Houston playing in the first two rounds from a Vegas standpoint? He goes, great idea.
Can't
Who
wait.
doesn't love a boss like that?
Absolutely.
Smart man, John. Smart man. And we're jealous that you're there the only time the weather's good in Indy.
Yeah.
And we didn't get to see it this time.
I'll send you a picture.
Please do.
Let you see that sunshine.
Please do, John.
Thank
you.
Have a great day, John. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it as always.
Again, check out John's work, GallerySports.com. You can also check out right now at OutKick the Kurt Schilling Baseball Show. Special guest this week is with Lenny Dykstra, Nails, and it's available every Tuesday and Friday on the site. The new show with Kurt Schilling Baseball Show, just baseball and great insights on the game now and stories from the past with great guests like Lenny Dykstra. Here's Kurt and Dykstra discussing John Smoltz.
I never talked to you guys or asked you guys this, but I always felt like against the Braves, the only guy you were concerned about facing in October was Smoltz. Glavine, no. Maddox, no. Avery, no. But Smoltz was the power guy, and he could make you swing and miss.
Yeah, so Smoltz, so a good story about Smoltz, so you brought him up. One of my favorite moments is, so we're playing in the bat. Smoltz is throwing a no-hitter, okay, into the ninth. Not a perfect game, okay, because he walked me once, okay? A no-hitter into the ninth. So, no-hitter, that's a big deal for a pitcher, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no-hitter. So Smoltz, okay, yeah, so it's the bottom of the ninth, they're up 6-0, okay, and I'm up third, okay? So first two guys, I mean, he just mows them down like redheaded stepchildren. Boom, boom, boom. Go to your room. So now I'm up. Now remember, he's 1 out away from a no-hitter, dude. And he knows I'm the only guy that could hurt him, okay? And so I know he's going to snap a hook off the first pitch, okay? Greg Olson's catching, okay? And then he snaps off a hook. There's just a nose-to-toe snap.
Filthy slider.
I'm waiting for to hear a strike and call the ball. Call the ball. So I said, you know what? He's going to try to stick some cheese in your inner half. Watch. He's feeling good. He did, dude. And he tried, and I hit a glass ball, like a laser, off the light. It isn't off the glass. Got to second base. and he was walking around the mountain kind of pounding. I took my shoe out and I threw it at him. I said, "You dumb." Yeah. So that, because dude, he's feeding for a pitcher, right?
Yep.
And 1 out away from a no-hitter.
That's how I lost mine. I lost mine with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th.
Oh, did you really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. The only pitch I shook off Veritek the entire game.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
6th and Peabody, our location with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Got headlines coming up, which will include from the NFL Combine and more, plus Clemson and Florida State. They want uneven revenue splits in the ACC. Can't really blame them based on how some of the other members of the ACC have been treating all the sports for that matter. They're not the only two, though, that deserve it.
Yeah, they're saying, we're pulling more weight than Boston College over here, so we need to get more money.
Brett McMurphy will join us as well coming up in about 30 minutes, 35 minutes from now. Chad, Ric Flair, he's made a ton of money off his career, but on Cameo, these 1-minute videos, he's made $700,000 roughly is what he told our friend Conrad Thompson, his son-in-law, on To Be the Man podcast last week. $700,000 is roughly what he would estimate off of the last year and a half since he joined the site.
Yeah, he showed the phone, and it was like $669,000 to be exact, but $500 for a personal message. You pay more for a business. I want to say it's like $5,000 for a business message, and then $1,500 I think was the price for a video chat.
Yeah,
you can live
like
video
FaceTime.
chat.
Yeah, whatever.
I mean, how many bachelor parties in America have just decided, guys, let's all throw in $50. There's 10 of us, and let's get a message from Ric Flair to the bachelor, or those a little bit more cash say, let's throw in $1,500 and call the dude on FaceTime right now, and he can join us as we take a shot to honor the bachelor. I mean, this is a brilliant business plan for a guy like Ric Flair, who's the king of the promo. He can cut a promo with the best of them, and to have that ability to do that for anyone at any time is awesome. I start thinking, why have we not done this before?
Well, I mean, the money that people are pulling.
I'm saying paying Ric Flair to do this. Not us personally. I'm saying I want to pay Ric Flair to cut a promo for us.
Lindsay Lohan makes $17,000 a week off of Cameo, all estimated. Carol Baskin, $120,000 a week.
Does she just say that she
now,
killed her
I don't know
husband?
if that's now. That was probably in the heyday of
Can you put
Tiger
that
King.
to Carol Baskin to put on the message that you killed your husband and then have her say it into the camera? That's your message. She's like, that'll be $100K just for that one message.
Yeah, I mean, you got
It's amazing.
Others who are charging $1,000, like Floyd Mayweather charges $1,000.
Well, OutKick's own Dan Dockich was on Cameo because back in the day when we were going back and forth 1 and 2, we had him cut a video telling, one of our listeners paid for it, for him to cut a video talking trash to us from his lake house.
Oh, that's right.
About Midday 180.
Yeah.
Before, we were in the same company with Dan.
Yeah,
this happened.
Yeah, and he's
now his fee was not $500. I want to say it cost my buddy $50 or $100 for Dan to do it. But look, Dan's not Ric Flair. None of us are Ric Flair.
Like I feel like Flair's is honestly reasonably charged, because you're right. You get people to pull in money, and they're going to get Flair's. Well, he'll do anything,
Well, there's I've looked at the clientele list before. I think like Brad Pitt is on there. There's some huge A-list celebrities, but it's like $10,000 to get them to do anything on that. And it's like a 30-second message they might send you, a happy birthday, right?
And it doesn't matter how they do it. They can be so disingenuous
if you're them,
with it.
you go way high with the price to do anything. So like if someone really wants to pay me this much money for nothing, I'll do it.
Everyone has a price.
But that's it. Yeah. But it's got to be this much.
Top headlines next, including the Falcons and a potential leap. That's next.
College football's in trouble. There's a lot of people trying to keep it from happening.
I think it's a general consensus across the college football landscape. We want to play football.
College football is a huge part of the fall. It's a huge part of Americana itself.
It just really felt like people in the country needed college football to just feel a little sense of normal.
Big news from the Big Ten as the conference releasing its 10-game football schedule.
We go home thinking there's going to be practice the next day. Everybody gets a text, stay home, everything's canceled.
Big Ten fall football season has been canceled.
We just believe collectively there's too much uncertainty.
I guess what I'm trying to understand, though, Kevin, is that was the same position you had 6 days ago.
The Big Ten is an unmitigated disaster.
There was a ton of confusion. There was presidents saying one thing, there was coaches saying another.
Players had to be silent, coaches had to be silent, ADs had to be silent.
People said, how does what you just did make any sense?
And nobody really knew what the heck happened when they voted to cancel the season.
You make this huge historical announcement, and then Kevin Warren never does a press conference to explain it. It was like a masterclass in how not to handle a crisis.
The word really that was lacking in all of this is transparency.
It felt like a lot of stuff was happening behind closed doors.
Even today, we still don't know what occurred.
So you don't tell us parents, that's fine, but you're not telling the young men that it affects.
We have to make a decision to save the season. What about the history books? What about the rivalry games? What about Paul Bunyan's axe? How is that not going to go to a team this year?
This is a failure of epic magnitude. The Big Ten presidents and leaders should be held accountable for the disastrous decisions that they're making.
Then the commissioner doubles down, saying his decision will not be revisited.
And that's the point. It felt like a war was declared on the Big Ten and Kevin Warren.
Everything turned political.
Because if this is medical, then you would have stopped the game of football a long time ago.
I think the Big Ten leaders will tell you that they probably made a mistake in hindsight.
If I had the chance to do it all over last year, I would make the same decisions that we made.
Just like that, the final hour is here on this Tuesday edition. Glad you're with us. Brett McMurphy will join us in 20 minutes. Big college headlines, including what is the Pac-12 going to do with their TV rights deal moving forward? What should they do? Plus a report out that it's already a foregone conclusion that Oregon and Washington are headed from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten. Again, Brett joins us in 20 minutes. NFL headlines galore today. Marcus Mariota released by the Atlanta Falcons. No surprise when I saw the breaking news headline. I mean, this is one you could have written last November whenever they made the transition from Mariota to Desmond Ridder, and then the saga happened where he left the team, and Arthur Smith saying he has a chronic knee issue, but it didn't prevent him from playing prior to him leaving the team. And then Mariota came back to the team. Craziness. But crazier. There is a speculation out there, and I've mentioned this, speculation now in Indy that the Falcons could be preparing to make an offer for Lamar Jackson with the Baltimore Ravens. They have freed up salary cap space even more so now. I believe they have the second or third best cap currently, around $65 million. And this is the first year in what has been a salary cap hell for them, where they don't have these massive contracts eating away at their cap for players who aren't even on the roster, namely Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. They were in the market for Deshaun Watson. And that's why I make the connection. If you're in the market for Deshaun Watson, you're willing to pay a certain amount for him, why wouldn't you do it for Lamar Jackson? And while they didn't give him the fully guaranteed deal, they allowed the Browns to do that. They weren't going to match it. I think they would be prepared to pay more than what Baltimore's willing to do, which is just slap a franchise tag on it.
But Baltimore would have to trade in this scenario, right, with Atlanta. I just don't know. Like, you really got to have a good plan if you're Baltimore, or just decide that, man, this guy just doesn't want to be here, and we're tired of it too, so we should just move on. I don't know why that would be the case. I'm just trying to get to a point where I feel like Baltimore would be compelled to trade away a guy that they built specifically around with how he runs offense and what they want to do as a team. Lamar Jackson is perfect in Baltimore with the team around him. Not to say that Arthur Smith would not devise a great offense for Lamar Jackson. I'd love to see it. Arthur Smith is a great offensive mind. I think it would be an interesting pairing with him in Atlanta, but to get Baltimore to the point where they want to move him, I think is difficult for me to foresee in all of this.
The only way it happens is Lamar Jackson makes it happen, right? We know that through the reports that the coaches haven't even talked to him since they've been hired. Todd Monken said that. I'm just keep a lookout for this. You sent a tweet that he sent out about a report that he was missing out on some sneaker deal or some Nike deal or something because he was representing himself and he messed up the negotiation.
Yeah, it was Mike Florio and Chris Sims that were discussing it, and they were talking about it on their show they do daily. And the tweet was, this is a report from it, that says, according to Mike Florio and Chris Sims, Lamar Jackson had a massive shoe deal fall through due to not having an agent. Hope this isn't true. And then Lamar Jackson retweeted it with a GIF of LeBron James with just a confused look on his face, looking up the scoreboard and then looking back down at the bench when that happened. Now, I took this as very clearly. Davey, our producer, said this could be taken one of two ways. My initial reaction was this Lamar Jackson saying, what?
Yeah, like
it's not true at all. Yeah, where are you hearing this?
But I guess it could also be taken as they're idiots because we had this set up. I don't know. I take it as the way you did, Chad. He's saying that Florio and Sims aren't.
Well, either that he's got the deal done or there was no deal to begin with and that it's nothing to do with an agent or I don't know.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, Lamar Jackson probably wouldn't know if a deal fell through because he doesn't have an agent. Why? Because he doesn't have an agent. So Florio and Sims could be dead on accurate and he just doesn't know because whoever's representing him has told him something different and he only knows what he knows. So he could be responding honestly with that confused LeBron James gif and not really know what the story is with the shoe deal, or there could have been no discussion about a shoe deal and this is all made up, or the shoe deal is done and he's responding to it that way. But going back to Lamar Jackson, the player in Baltimore, I just don't see how they would move him.
Well,
I mean, you franchise him at worst and he plays under the franchise tag unless, what, he's going to say he's not going to play?
I don't know. I think he would play under the franchise tag, or you could give him the non-exclusive tag where he can sign it, but another team can match that offer. And if Baltimore wanted to let him go because the team that's going to match the offer is going to sign him to a bigger deal, they would get 2 first-round picks in return.
Yeah, they'd get
as compensation
for compensatory picks.
So, I mean, it's an interesting scenario. They have not named.
That sounds like a pretty good option to me.
They have not named, well, unless you think you can get more than 2 first-round picks in return for Lamar Jackson, then you negotiate the bigger trade prior.
Then you
to the
go
draft
to Atlanta and say, let's
tag him.
Let's talk shop.
But the tag deadline's coming up, so it's next week. So we'll know one way or the other here. The other interesting thing about Atlanta, they have not said publicly since the season ended that Desmond Ridder is the starter, and I take that to mean it's wide open. Because normally if you got a quarterback going into year 2 and you get rid of your veteran, he's your guy. They haven't said that about Ridder.
Well, not shocking, for a 3rd-round pick, right? Ridder was 3rd round.
Just before
that you're
Malik
not
Willis.
that you're not just complete. Now, look, Ridder looked better than Malik Willis in his time playing, so there's some more question marks there. There's no question about Malik Willis. He's not the guy for the Titans. But I take that as, we're not sold this guy's ever going to be that good. So we're in the market looking around with that no statement on him being the starter.
Leonard Fournette released by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're freeing up cap space there as well. The veteran now has his tenure done with the Bucs. Taylor Lewan on Bussin' with the Boys says there are 3 teams he refuses to play for, and they're the 3 teams not named the Tennessee Titans in the AFC South. I can't tell whether or not the guy wants to play anymore. I go back and forth on this because he continues to entertain conversation. And Vrabel even said today at the Combine that they have talked with Taylor about whether or not he wants to continue to play. But first, he's got to clear a physical. He's coming off the second knee injury in 3 years.
I'm shocked he's even discussing playing, honestly. When I saw this quote about teams he wouldn't play for, I've thought all along, and maybe we'll get to that point, he's going to go do Bussin' with the Boys, do more for Barstool Sports, and be in media, and he's going to crush it the way he's been crushing it. He's really good. I mean, he's a guy, he could be on College Game Day one day in an entertaining bit. I mean, he's a super smart, funny, entertaining dude in the same line as a former player as Pat McAfee, and he's someone that's got a bright future in media. So I'd be surprised if he doesn't just get to it and get going with it, especially considering the injuries. I'm not saying Taylor Lewan doesn't love football. Clearly he did for a long time. And if he wants to get back out there and play again, he loves it a lot more than I even thought that he loved it, based on the injuries combined with his success in media.
Plus a reduced role. You would think if he comes back here.
It's surprising to me that.
Based on pay. And that's just because of the availability of what the team knows.
He loves it a lot more than I thought if he decides to come back and play, whether it be for the Titans in a reduced role or anywhere else. The fact that he's saying that about the rest of the division also shows me that this is a guy that ultimately wants to be remembered only as a Titan. He lives in Nashville now. Nashville will be his permanent home, and that is important to him. And that is business 101.
Yeah.
That is so smart. I wish more athletes understood the value of not turning on a place where you've spent your entire career and endearing yourself even more to a fan base in Nashville, the Titans, that called him Dad for years, right? They had the dad hats.
Right.
And they referred to him as Dad.
It's like Rodgers with Chicago.
That is very, very smart business to come out and say that. Regardless of what he's going to do, maybe he's leaning towards retiring either way. But just saying that, putting it out there, and if he actually goes and practices it and either goes somewhere else or stays the Titan and avoids those teams and then still calls Nashville home and the Titans his team, I think that's just good long-term business association with one franchise. I would give that advice to any player that spends a good amount of time with one franchise.
Chad, coming up tomorrow, we'll chat with Marcellus Wiley, and he had the comments a week or so ago where he was discussing he wouldn't let his daughter play against a team that had a transgender female on to compete against his daughter on that roster, or individually for that matter. There's a girls basketball team at a Christian school in Vermont that forfeited a state championship game upon learning the opposing team was they had on a roster a transgender player. And the head of the Christian school argued that it was unfair, unsafe for her girls to compete against a biological male on the court, and so they withdrew from the state championship instead of playing through the postseason. That is a difficult call based on the time and effort, no matter what level you're playing, for your team to just bow out based on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been very consistent on this, regardless of who we're talking about, that it's not about, to me, this is not about, trans rights or, what we want or expect and how we treat humans or any of those things, right? I mean, transgender people have rights and deserve rights like any other American in this country, but that does not give you the right to cross over and compete in female sports, especially at the high school level. We're talking about here. So there's a fairness issue to this that makes no sense, and it's not fair, and it shouldn't happen. Now, this is a tough call, because if I'm the coach or I'm the headmaster at this school and my girls have made it to a state championship game, and these girls are wanting to play, regardless of who's on the other side of the court.
This is a quarterfinal, just to be clear. It was a state championship tournament, but it's a quarter of that. Yeah, that's through the story at OutKick right now.
They're playing for a state championship.
No doubt.
And they're on the road to maybe winning a state title. and this is the final game for a group of seniors or whatever it may be, I'm putting this up to a team vote. That'd be my call as the coach. I could have my own stance and say it's unfair. Now, if I saw the transgender player on the other side is hurting other girls or there's a safety issue from a size and strength standpoint, I would let that weigh into my decision. But I'm letting the girls on my team vote on this. They're the ones who have worked to be there. It's their season. It's the end of their career. I assume most of them aren't going on to play college ball. So it's the last big-time event they're going to be a part of as an athlete. I let them vote on it.
Yeah, and I mean, so everyone wants to be inclusive with all these rules and regulations instead of just doing what's right. And this just makes no sense. Where this is a middle school that's in Vermont where this is going down. But, I mean, the fact that parents and coaches and players are having to make this decision based on the exception of one person that is biologically the opposite of the league you're in, to me, makes no sense.
Yeah, so
it's less about fair and just doing this. This is what's right. Men and women and having separation biologically, not with the ideas, but with what we know through the science.
So Vicky Fogg is the head coach at Mid Vermont Christian School. And this was her statement about withdrawing from the game. She says, "We withdrew from the tournament because we believe playing against an opponent with a biological male jeopardizes the fairness of the game and the safety of our players. Allowing biological males to participate in women's sports sets a bad precedent for the future of women's sports in general." I totally agree with everything she said in that statement. And I'll say this, while I would lean towards doing what the girls on my team wanted to do, if they wanted to give it a shot and go play the game, the only way to affect change is doing what Vicky Fogg did. I mean, it's a story at OutKick and a lot of other places because she forfeited. If they play the game and lose in the natural way and the other team just moves on to the quarterfinals, then you're probably not doing much to affect change in regards to that. So you got to weigh that part of it also, right? I had this conversation with my 7-year-old last night. We had softball practice. Got home, there was a men's college basketball game. I'm not sure what was on the TV, and we're sitting there watching some of it. And my 7-year-old daughter said, "Dad, I don't really want to say this, but I'll say it. The boys' games are better than the girls' games when I watch them on TV." And she asked me the question. She said, "So are boys better than girls?" And I said, "Well, boys are naturally bigger and stronger and faster a lot of times, so the games look different. I believe the games are better. They're more fun to watch." And my 7-year-old, Evie, gave me a look like, "Really, Dad? Really? You're going to say that to me, your daughter?" And I said, "I'm just telling you the truth about it. Doesn't make what you do any less important. Doesn't mean that you're not better at a million other things than, dunking a basketball like these guys are that we're watching this college basketball game. Doesn't mean any of those things. I'm just being honest with you that there's a difference between boys and girls and how they grow and how they develop and how they play sports and how they operate physically." And, it wasn't the easiest thing to tell my 7-year-old that when she hears from the boys at school that, baseball is better than softball, and she's arguing with them that, yeah, boys are different than girls. But I also told her to go fight back and, tell them how good you are at softball, and you can throw a ball with them at any time and show them that. But bottom line is, look, this is a dialogue that needs to happen. We'll have Marcellus Wiley on the show tomorrow and continue the dialogue. There's easy to me right and wrong on certain things and easy to explain it. There are other moments that I talk about with that to illustrate that it's not always the easiest thing to talk about also. So I get part of that. And I think this is one of those examples of, to me, not the easiest decision in the world to not play this game and forfeit if you're this school and you're this coach.
Not easy, but the decision that's made, I totally understand.
I totally understand the decision.
And I think,
and again, it's the only way to affect change.
But the vast majority of those on this topic agree with exactly what the coach said in this from the Vermont Middle School.
It is such a vast, minuscule minority of people that would argue saying it's completely fair and normal for biological males to compete against women in sports if they're transitioning. It's just such a small percentage of people. most people that don't want to talk about it or don't like the talking points on this will just come back and say, it doesn't happen that much, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't happen enough to talk about, so shut up about it. How many times has this happened? Has it affected you yet? That's kind of also the comeback is, have you gone through this yet? Again, I don't think it's a huge widespread issue yet, but it can become that if you don't stop it and you don't just say what it honestly is, unfair.
18 states have done legislation that has passed to keep this from happening at public institutions or schools or leagues. But public leagues, I'm saying through the school. This is a private school in Vermont that had to forfeit. Coming up, we dive into the college football headlines with Brett McMurphy. We'll start with the Pac-12 and the example of what not to do and how to handle change versus what the reports are for Clemson and FSU that want more of a revenue split, a higher share because of their brand name for the conference in the ACC and what that could mean for the conference. That's all straight ahead on OutKick 360.
As a pitcher, there's nothing I love more. There was nothing that I relished more than a one pitch out. That was like a gift from God as a pitcher, because I had this game plan. I got to get a hitter out. I got to work this count. I got to do these things. You give me a one pitch out, and then I didn't like to face guys like you for this reason. I don't want to have to use 7, 8, 9 pitches to get an out. I don't want, and that was the Tony Gwynn thing. You had the strike zone, but you knew the strike zone. And so, my forte, you show me a guy that strikes out 100 times, I can show you a guy I can get out pretty easily because he's got holes. You show me a guy that gets on base 40% of the time, and I'm going to have a little bit of a concern. And you mentioned something that I think tails into the discussion we're going to have today. I worked quick, and so people have asked me about the pitch clock, and I said the pitch clock will never affect a pitcher that sucks, because good pitchers work fast. And if you saw Scherzer yesterday, it was hilarious. He struck a guy out who was backing out of the batter's box. I mean, but that's what we did. Tempo was part of my game. That was part of it's a weapon, and hitter, and not being able to. And I'm wondering, because you were a guy that took time in at bats. You could make a 10-pitch at bat go a while. How are hitters going to have to adjust now? You can only get out of the box one time. You got to be in the, the tempo is going to be a lot quicker. Good or bad for hitters?
Bad. Look. You're talking to a guy. Okay, remember. So when I let off the game on the road, okay, at that moment in time, I controlled everything.
Right.
So when we used to play Atlanta, okay, in Atlanta, I used to take a long sweeping walk, bro, and stop right in front of Ted Turner and Jane Fonda, and stare right into Jane Fonda's eyes, and I'd say some things that I shouldn't say on here, but that was tradition, and people would be yelling, "Get in the box," and I'd be like, you know what I'd say to them.
Yep.
And you don't get voted the most hated player in the league 5 years in a row without doing these kind of things.
Right.
But I was voted the most hated player in the league because I made the other people's jobs hard.
Yep.
See, so like I say, remember our team? Like, I see you talking to the other teammate, we're fighting.
Yeah.
We're playing for real money here.
Right.
And the thing about it is, and that's why when you pitched, you were so prepared and took it so serious, you carried out to the field too. Don't forget, when you're out there in the field and you got a guy, I don't want to use people's names.
Guy going 3-2 on everybody, and no, I get that, and that was part of that too, Lenny. I learned on that team because it was a veteran team, and I was a younger guy. Listen, when we're playing in St. Louis and it's 165 degrees on the turf, I need to get my players off the field. And so that became because I always wanted, and as I got older and became more in charge of my defense, I always wanted guys invested in the day I pitched.
From 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine, glad you're with us for OutKick 360. Pleased to be joined by Action Network's college football insider, Brett McMurphy, joins the OutKick Network. Brett, thank you for the time, man.
Hey, you got it. Good afternoon, guys.
Pleasure to be with you again. So we've been discussing your reporting on the Pac-12 media rights deal at length, and I want to get your perspective on where they are right now versus where they thought they'd be, and what are they actually selling to other networks to drive the price up, Brett?
I was hoping you guys would tell me. That's why I was coming on. Look, I mean, it's, the Pac-12 has been an easy punching bag. And, I feel for George Kliavkoff right now because he's got a tough job, the Pac-12 the commissioner. You could say that perhaps the Pac-12 could have or should have done things differently a year ago regarding their media rights, maybe regarding trying to grab some schools from the Big 12. But, look, I'm an Oklahoma State alum, and I'm not shy at admitting it. I didn't blame the Pac-12 for trying to add any Big 12 schools. It didn't make sense. They didn't want to drop to that level, if you will, academically and for other reasons. So that made sense. But ironically, because they didn't do that, and new Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark went early with the Big 12's media rights, what it did is it basically capped what the Pac-12 can get. Because if you're ESPN, you're not going to pay the Pac-12 more than you're paying the Big 12. You're not going to pay them more than you're paying the ACC. I won't insult your intelligence by even comparing the Pac-12 to the SEC. So what you ask, where can they go? That's the unknown. I know this. Fox has no interest in the Pac-12. They're locked in with the Big 10. They also have a smaller deal with the Big 12, also a smaller deal with the Mountain West. They simply have no room to add any inventory. So where does the Pac-12 go? Well, ESPN could take a smaller package, or you could go the streaming route. But then you get into, do you want to go the streaming route where potentially you could get more money, but then you're not going to get that constant drumbeat of promotion if you're on a streaming service, on the weekend. NHL and ESPN is a perfect example. When the NHL wasn't on ESPN, you never heard anything about the NHL on SportsCenter or all their shows. Now that they have a deal with the NHL, it's on all the time. That's cool. That's how they work. So if the Pac-12 went exclusively streaming, they may get a little more money, but they're not going to get that daily promotion. And there's a lot of people within the Pac-12 that do not want to do that. What can they do? What will they do? That's the big unknown. And there's not a right or wrong answer. It's trying to get the most money you can for your membership schools. And on top of all of that, then you've got the factor that, people continue to tell me that the Big Ten is not done expanding. So that means they will go get Oregon and Washington at some point. Will it be tomorrow? Will it be next week? Will it be 2 years from now? I don't know. But if I'm Oregon and Washington, how enthusiastic am I at signing a new grant of rights deal, whether it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever is presented in front of me, knowing that there's a very real possibility I could get an invite to the Big Ten. And so it's kind of like if you're, are you gonna lease your apartment for 4 more years, knowing that you're going to move in a new house in 2? No, nobody's going to do that. So all of these factors make it challenging for the Pac-12. And also, what hurts the Pac-12 is ESPN's not really bidding against anybody. So ESPN's not going to say, oh, you know what, we feel bad for the Pac-12. We're going to throw you an extra $100 million. Apple and Amazon, they're not really bidding against anybody. So they're not going to say, you know what, we're going to overpay for this just because we feel bad for the situation you're in. And so that's where, everyone in the industry is kind of wondering where they're going to end up. I've reported previously that CBS and Turner were no longer involved. As I mentioned earlier, Fox is not involved. I mean, they could look at some, Live Golf is on CW. I reported that Eon TV, which has, 60, 70 local channels nationwide, could be a potential destination or part of the package. Everyone's kind of waiting to see. And also the Big 12 is waiting to see what's going to happen, because if the Pac-12 presents a media rights deal that is not equal or near what the Big 12 has moving forward, then I think you'll see the likes of Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah look very seriously at going to the Big 12.
And when you see this, it's such a tough spot. The Pac-12's in right now, Brett, and you know that. But the possibility of just doing a short-term deal that's not great, but could be an experiment right now for the Pac-12 to not lock anyone into anything long-term, that's also not going to be great compared to the other big conferences. An example would be Apple TV, right? The idea that they could have a Friday night game and have other Pac-12 games, but the Friday night game could be promoted, Amazon. The Amazon Thursday night NFL game could promote a Friday night game on Amazon. Then if Apple comes in, who needs their own catalog, their own inventory, because they don't have anything going into it, and they wanted to take over most of the rest of the games, to do that as an experiment. I know you don't have that ESPN bang for your buck with the promotion of it, but what do you think about maybe a short-term deal for 2 to 3 years to try to get everyone locked into that and then see what the market looks like, let's say 2 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. And I'm sure Kliavkoff is thinking about every possible scenario out there. If you're going to do a 2 or 3 year deal, then certainly I think those schools would be receptive to doing that. But still, if you're Oregon or Washington, they really haven't said anything, what number they're looking for. If they do get a number they're looking for, look, even if Kliavkoff is able to get them Big 12 money, which is about $31, $32 million per school, even if he's able to do that, Oregon and Washington will more than double that, and 5 to 10 years from now could triple that by going to the Big 10. So even if Kliavkoff can get that number, like you mentioned, through Apple or Amazon or some other way, look, they would sign it if they had to, if they didn't have an invite from the Big Ten in the near future, because if basically it gets down to either sign this deal or you're no longer a member of the conference, and if they have no invitation from the Big Ten, then they've got to sign the deal unless they want to try to be an independent for a few years, which technically they could, I guess. Good luck trying to schedule some teams that, some non-group of 5 teams this late in the game. I mean, they could do that, but that's kind of the predicament they're in, and that's kind of the predicament that the Pac-12's in. But believe me, what you suggested, I think they're thinking of that. I think they're thinking of every possible solution they can. But again, unless somebody just blatantly overpays, some company blatantly overpays for the Pac-12, and most of these media companies make a lot of money because they don't overpay for a lot of things, then I don't know how they're going to get to that money. And then if they don't get to that money, then what's going to happen? Then these Pac-12 schools are going to have some tough decisions. Forget about Oregon and Washington. What are Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah going to do? And I know the narrative now is, and I understand it out there, is that, look, everybody in the Pac-12, kumbaya, we're sticking together, we're working together, we're going to stay together. Yeah, absolutely. You guys are going to stay together. You're going to stay at OutKick for the rest of your life until you're not, and then you're gone. And I'm not dissing OutKick, but you know what I'm saying? Everyone's going to stay committed where they're at until they're not. So the fact that nobody's coming out now and saying, well, we're going to leave if we don't get the money, nobody's going to say that publicly. Privately, yeah, but publicly, no. And so there's just so many challenges that's facing the Pac-12, and it reminds me of several years ago when the Big East folded, because basically it came down to a battle royale between the Big East and the ACC, and the ACC went and got Pitt and Syracuse, and later got Louisville, and now we look at the ACC as a football conference, and the Big 12 football conference no longer exists.
Brett McMurphy, our guest, Action Network college football insider. Brett, the reports that Clemson and Florida State want more of a heavier revenue share based on their brands compared to other members in the conference for the ACC. What can be learned about what we're in the middle of right now with the Pac-12 negotiations versus what they're locked into with the ACC and their grant of rights? And what do you think they see in their reflection? The other member institutions, as USC and UCLA walked, maybe we see Oregon and Washington, maybe not. But if you have your top brands of your conference saying, yeah, we need a bigger split to survive, do you take note of that, or do you ignore it and say, no, give me my fair share?
No, I think that could be a possibility. But again, let's say that Kliavkoff is able to get an average of, we'll say 32 million, the same as the Big 12, 32 million per school. And then you want to do unequal revenue distribution. Okay, well, let's say the top school gets 40 million and the bottom school gets 20, 25 or 23 or whatever it is. Even if Oregon or Washington is getting 40 million and everyone else is getting 30 or 27, they are still going to lead. It's not a long-term solution. It's a short-term solution, and that could work. And the same with the ACC. You can give Florida State, you can give Clemson, the ACC's around that 30 million mark too, maybe a little bit more. You can give them 40 million. You can give Wake Forest 20 million. You can give Syracuse 17, however you want to break it up.
Mm-hmm.
But bottom line is, if Clemson and Florida State and North Carolina, and all the usual suspects out of the ACC, if any of them can figure out a way to get over the wall or dig under the wall and get out of that long-term grant of rights deal, they're going to do it. Because as Michael Alfred, the Florida State athletic director, said the other day, talking to the board of trustees, knowing this was a public function, knowing this would get out, he basically said, look, going forward, we're going to be about $30 million behind the Big Ten and the SEC, and we simply cannot compete that way. So I think unequal revenue distribution is a possibility, but I think it's a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, and I don't think it's ultimately long term. I don't think it's going to do much. It may appease a school, whether it's in the Pac-12 or the ACC, but bottom line is, if they get an invite from one of the Power Two, Godzilla or King Kong, choose your favorite monster for the SEC and Big Ten, they're going to leave if they can.
Obviously, if you are in the Big Ten or the SEC, the Godzilla and King Kong, you call them there, Brett, then you're good financially. You think things are going to be okay. You're sort of recession-proof in those two conferences because they're going to carry the banner for major college sports for the foreseeable future. Let's say Florida State, Clemson, I'll throw Oregon, Washington into this mix also. Even though they're not in one of those two conferences currently, have they ever had more power than they do right now based on the fact that their current conferences know they got to do whatever it takes to keep them because they have value while also having the ability to flirt with King Kong and Godzilla and know that you may be something that they want eventually, and then you could just go join the financially secure conferences? Are they as powerful as they've ever been for that reason?
Yeah, that's a good point. And you're right. They are powerful, and they are at a great they're in a great situation as far as negotiating. But also keep in mind, if Florida State, Clemson, Washington, Oregon, North Carolina, etc., if they didn't have the brand recognition, if they didn't, attract the TV eyeballs and all those different things, they wouldn't have this power. So they kind of always had the power. But now they have the leverage because what they're getting paid in their current conferences is so drastically different than where they could end up. And so, again, that's why whenever there's conference realignment, I know it's easy to, target the commissioner. How could Bob Bowlesby let Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC? Look, you and I could have been commissioner. The same thing would have happened. It doesn't matter. They're leaving a conference to go to another conference where they're going to double the value of their media rights deal every year. They basically guaranteed the future of their athletic department for the next 20 years by making that move. It doesn't matter who the conference is. It doesn't matter who the commissioner is. Schools are going to do that because of the money. Well, who determines how much each school is worth? Is it the conferences? No, it's the TV networks, And I'm not saying that ESPN is here pulling the string saying, we wanted you to bring in Texas and Oklahoma. But what happens is, and it happens with every conference, it happened with the Big Ten. The Big Ten goes to its TV partners. The SEC goes to its TV partners and says, if we add OU and Texas, our current deal is worth X. If we add those schools, what is it going to be worth? And ESPN tells them that. Fox tells the Big Ten, you're worth this. If you add USC and UCLA, it's worth this. If you add Notre Dame, it's worth this. And so then the presidents get together and say, hey, you know what? If we add these schools, we go from this amount of money every year to this amount of money, do you want to proceed with expansion and realignment? And they're all like, yeah, let's do it right away. So it's kind of, they do have the power now, probably more power than they've ever had. But again, part of it is because of the brand name recognition they have and the value that they have brought. If Florida State, you know, they're obviously on the uptick now. They're going to be a preseason top 10 team in the fall. But, you know, if they had strung together, you know, 3 or 4 consecutive 2 or 3 win seasons, they probably wouldn't be looked at highly enough. But they are a big brand name, and, you know, they are an attractive team. And if them, Clemson, if any of the teams from the ACC can figure out a way to get out of the grant of rights before 2036, which I think they will, I just don't know how soon before then. Believe me, the SEC and Big Ten are going to be having a bidding war for those guys. So that kind of leads back to what you said initially, where certainly they'll have more power than they've ever had before, because I think ultimately what we're going to end up with is the Big Two will end up having 24 schools in each conference. And then, you know, we'll kind of have whatever else is left. And I don't know if that'll still be Division I anymore, if it'll be a different division or it'll be split into, you know, 1AA or whatever they want to call it. But I think it'll be like the NFL. You'll have the SEC will be on ESPN, the Big Ten will be on Fox or CBS, and, you know, the 2 champs will play in college football Super Bowl. But I think that's probably about 10 years away.
Brett, who are you hearing is the next commissioner of the Big Ten? Who's going to be in the mix of all of this?
I don't really. I mean, I've heard names, but I wouldn't want to put anything out there because then it's like, oh, Brett Murphy said this guy is up for it. I think there's a lot of people. They don't have it. I know them. I strongly believe. Well, I've been told, not that I believe it. I've been told there isn't a so-called leader in the clubhouse. I mean, they're basically, you know, they're looking under every rock, searching everywhere they can, and they got to decide, you know, what kind of commissioner do they want? Do they want to, you know, someone that has a, you know, collegiate background, or do they want to, you know, go kind of the same route they did with Kevin Warren, somebody that didn't have a college background, but, you know, was you know, stronger in other areas, television and different things. So, you know, it's the presidents will figure that out. I'm sure you'll see a lot of names thrown out there. A lot of them are agents calling up reporters and saying, "Can you get my guy's name out there?" But yeah, sorry, I can't. I don't have. If I knew, I'd tell you. But I at this point, I really don't know. I do know they want to move fairly quickly. Kevin Warren officially moves to the Bears in April, so I know they want to move quickly as they can. But it's something they're not going to rush.
Which of those descriptions do you think the SEC would hate the most? The guy with the background or not?
I don't know. There is a real rivalry between the SEC and the Big Ten. I'll have to tell you guys that, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger. So I guess the SEC would want whoever they perceive as the weakest pick for the commissioner, because I really believe, guys, when these ACC schools are ever able to get out of this out of grant of rights deal, you know, the Big Ten and SEC they're gonna go after them, and it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. And then the fallout from that obviously will impact the Big 12. It'll impact what's left with the ACC. You know, whatever's going on with the Pac-12 at that point, is the Pac-12 simply, you know, 3 or 4 schools that were left over plus whoever they cobbled together from the Mountain West? I'm not sure, but you know, the Big Ten will do all right, and obviously we know the SEC is going to do all right. But it's, you know, I talk about realignment a lot. People kind of get the perception I like it. I don't like realignment. I like covering it because I've got a lot of contacts. But bottom line, I think it sucks. I hate it for the sport. I love the old days where we had the Southwest Conference and we had the WAC, and, you know, we didn't have 16-team conferences. We had 10 or 12, and that was max. And I loved it. And I hate that because I'm afraid that college football is continuing down the path of becoming, well, it already is professional, but it's becoming more and more like the NFL. And I think the NFL is a cookie cutter league. And hopefully college football doesn't become that, because I think that's why we love college football so much, especially I know you guys, because there's so much disparity. There's so much difference. There's
Yep.
so much craziness. And I'm afraid if everyone becomes the same, then we're going to lose some of that uniqueness and wildness that we come to love and expect every Saturday.
Totally agree. And if you really want to stoke the fires, that Big Ten SEC rivalry, the Big Ten should try to hire Greg Sankey as their next, get a bidding war going. I don't know what his contract situation is, but you want to talk about a blockbuster bit of news is if they just went and plucked the SEC commissioner to be the new Big Ten commissioner. Won't happen.
Or the number 2.
But that'd be quite the headline for you, Brett.
Well, that's another, again, keep that in mind. That's a perfect example about some of these schools that could come open. You know, sometimes you may just take a school so another conference can't get that school. So, yeah, obviously the Big Ten, you know, would love to have Sankey, you know, because of what he could do for the conference. Knowing Sankey's relationship with the SEC, I would guess he would play along, and then he would come out publicly and say, I'm staying at home, you know, Wolf of Wall Street. I ain't going anywhere, you know, that kind of deal. But I can break this news for you. Greg Sankey is not a candidate for the commissionership of the Big Ten.
Damn
Sorry,
it.
guys.
I was hoping for that story. That would have been a great story for us.
And Brett, here's breaking news. The SEC will claim victory over that statement as well.
They're about to put. They're actually about to put that Leo GIF out right now.
I can hear the chant
about
going.
I'm not leaving. Yeah.
Brett, thank you so much, man. Always enjoy your insight, and we'll continue to follow your great work.
You got it, guys. Anytime. Thank you.
Thanks,
Brett
Brett.
Murphy, their Action Network, College Football Insider. Great follow on social.
Can you imagine, by the way, Sankey coming out Chris Jericho Y2J style as the Big Ten new commissioner? The countdown begins.
Or
and he's standing there with his arms up.
Or he's the higher power deal with Vince McMahon.
Oh my
the
gosh!
Undertaker.
Can you imagine that story?
An example of the SEC distancing itself as a conference from Brandon Miller and what's going on at Alabama. That's next on OutKick 360.
Welcome into OutKick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I have been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
OutKick 360 from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer, Old Smoky Moonshine. It's been a fast-paced show today, Tuesday edition. Hope you'll join us tomorrow. Clay Travis will be with us, plus Marcellus Wiley and more. Chad,
it's going to be a good show.
Maybe an example of the SEC distancing itself from Brandon Miller and the Crimson Tide and what's gone on this week, last week, with the details from the preliminary hearing where Miller supplied the gun. He brought the gun to the scene to Darius Miles prior to the murder and the capital murder charges that now take place. He's not the freshman of the week, Brandon Miller, for hoops. Instead, it was Nick Smith Jr. as the freshman of the week in the SEC. And I think we know who played well last week. Brandon Miller.
So I'm trying to find exactly who votes on it. It says coaches and media have some sort of say on this for SEC players of the week and freshmen of the week. So did all the coaches and media get together and decide not to vote for Brandon Miller, or did what I think is the more likely outcome,
yes,
the SEC just decide, I don't care who voted for him. We're going to have second place win this week and not Brandon Miller.
Without a doubt.
He averaged 32 points a game.
I mean,
over
he's
the
player
week.
of the year. That's been our whole point.
He single-handedly won the game at South Carolina, avoiding disaster because South Carolina's bad, and they won that game in overtime. And then they get down, I think, 12 points, 13 points at one point to Arkansas. He leads them back, has a great game against the Razorbacks at home. They win that game 2-0 week. He averaged over 30 during the week. He's the SEC player of the week on the court, and the SEC decided not to give it to him. We had this discussion about, if you have a vote for SEC Freshman of the Year, Player of the Year, where do you vote? It's Brandon Miller's award.
It's him. But that's our point with the whole argument against what Bama's done. If it's anyone else,
I would vote for him because he's been eligible and playing. So I abide by the rules of it.
And the conference
he's the Freshman of the Year.
Yeah.
So he's probably the Player of the Year in the SEC also. He's both. So, I mean, that's the uncomfortable part of all this. Nate Oates is going to continue to stand up there and talk about TSA pat-down pregame rituals, stuff that he can explain and say what's going on and then fall on the sword for that. But what you're not going to get is full explanation as to why he didn't get disciplined at all by the team, because there really is no explanation other than he's a really good player and we want him to play.
And that's
it. We're not going to ruin this one season. No matter what he's been involved with, he's going to play the whole way because Brandon Miller is our chance to win a national championship.
And
period.
In today's media world, it fades away if he doesn't do the pat-down and then post it on social. I mean, that's the sad part about this. It's a 24-hour news cycle, and they're on to Auburn, right? But Nate Oates continues to make statements. Brandon Miller continues to do these things where, knowing how it looked even post-game, is still posting that photo where he's posed while getting the pat down as the header on Twitter and then deleting his account.
Look, they can try to move on to Auburn, and they can the patsy media that cover Alabama. They can talk about the mental fortitude of Brandon Miller in these last few weeks and everything else. The rest of America is going to continue to think about the murder of the young mother every time they see Brandon Miller in Alabama play. That's just going to be the storyline in everyone's mind and what's going to be covered nationally until this season ends for Alabama.
Back at it tomorrow. Plenty of NFL Combine news and notes and reaction, opinion on what we've heard from the floor today and news that will be out tomorrow. I hope you'll join us 3 o'clock Eastern start time. OutKick Network for OutKick 360.